the same mentality I've been seeing amongst a lot of people nowadays.
Listen, I think we should be skeptical, but I don't think we should be cynical about it.
Right.
Okay? There are some places where we can make a difference.
Yes.
There are going to be a lot of races, like presidential races in particular, okay, where there's going to be just so much corruption. It's going to be the old expression, they stole it fair and square. I think that might have been from the Nixon camp during the JFK Nixon election. You know, that's what's happening at those levels. And, of course, they can reach into any race that they consider to be very important, and they can do that at the governor level. They can even go down ballot and do it in certain areas. But I don't believe that we have the situation yet where they are that interested in all of the races. And so I think if you overwhelmingly support something, it gets to the point where I think they will basically back off and hope that they can corrupt the person after they get into office. And, of course, we have to hold their feet to the fire. But I think that it's always worthwhile getting in there, if for nothing else, to expose the corruption in the system and use that as an opportunity to wake people up and say, look at how the system is rigged. Look at how these guys are two hand puppets off of the same corporatist.
Well, that's what we're trying to do here, too, though.
Exactly.
We go out and we find these politicians and we give them real questions. We go out there and ask them the stuff that mainstream media is, quite frankly, scared to do.
Yes.
The mainstream media does not do their job anymore when it comes to covering these politicians and, like you said, holding their feet to the fire. And that's something that we at INFOWARS do. We go out there and we ask those hard questions. We make them be accountable for their actions and what they say.
And as far as that goes, you know, like David touched on, you know, your big national elections, there's a lot of things going on that are beyond your control. But your local elections, your sheriff, your city council, your mayor, you know, those things that you should get involved in and hopefully affect change. You know, right here in the city of Austin, Texas, we have a very anti-gun candidate running for our mayor.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if he gets in, you know, we have a very pro-gun city councilman, you know, who's trying to get elected. So you have things like that. You can have somewhat of a balance. You know, I don't think it's just a good idea to cast the whole thing off. Like David said, you can be skeptical, but...
And I think it's important to look down ballot and to not throw away the idea that you don't have any power except at the very top of the ticket.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of power. If you get the right people in, lower down, you know, for some reason, you know, if you can get somebody in that really understands that states do have power under the Constitution to withstand some of the illegal actions of the federal government. We have a candidate like that here in Texas, Kathy Glass, who's running for governor. And, you know, this race here in Texas now is so skewed that the argument that, you know, well, you've got to vote for Tweedledee because if you don't, Tweedledum is going to get in. Now you've got pretty much a certain winner here in Greg Abbott. Looks like he's 20 points ahead of the Democrat opponent, so much so that they're analyzing this and saying, you know, boy, is she going to sink battleground Texas? You know, I mean, it's basically it's a done deal. So I think a lot of people are going to be free to both Democrats and Republicans to vote for who they would like to see and not really worry about the other guy getting in that they're afraid of. And I think that a lot of these third-party candidates will take from both Democrats and Republicans because they're talking about some of the issues that neither the Democrats or Republicans are addressing, or they say, we're the guy that's going to help you with economic freedom, or we're the guy that's going to help you with civil liberties, and then when they get in office, they basically forget about that.
And it's not so much what they say, it's what they do, because we see, shining example, President Obama said he's going to shut down Guantanamo Bay, said he's going to leave your guns home, said he's going to do this, said he's going to do that, said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You know, it's not what they say, it's what they do. And, you know, let's try to get a good feel, you know, for anybody at any level that you plan to vote for. Just try to get a good feel of what they've done in the past and, you know, contrast that with what you think they may perform in the future.
Let me say one more thing, too, about elections, and that's Ron Paul. Okay, Ron Paul, you could say that it was quixotic for him to run as a Libertarian candidate back when he did it. Then he ran in 2008, okay, had no chance, was kept out of the debates, that sort of thing. He kept plugging at it. And then 2012, he had a massive amount of support. I believe that that nomination was stolen from him by the GOP. And a lot of people saw that election stolen from Ron Paul at caucus after caucus, dirty tricks at the primaries by the Republicans. And that's a very valuable thing because he exposed the fraud, okay, by running for election. And so it got a lot of people to understand how this system is rigged. And I think there was a lot of value to that, even though they stole the election. Let's go back to Leanne. Leanne, do you have anything else?
Well, I just want to add to that. It's like Alex said today. If the game is rigged, it's like football. We've got to get up 50 points ahead of them because we know they're going to be, setting up the machines in Maryland where they're going to choose, force you to choose a Democratic candidate if you wanted to vote Republican or for someone else. It'll just switch your vote for you. But there, you can demand a recount if you're actually seeing that in the voting booth. But Southern Patriot, he's also asking what can people do about it? What will Americans do about it if they do find out that there is rampant voter fraud?
Well, I had a chance to talk to James O'Keefe today, and we'll air that, if not today, then tomorrow, talking about his experiences in not voter fraud, but, trying to take it to the extreme to see how easy it is to actually commit the voter fraud.
Yeah.
And, he was exposing that just if you live in a certain state, like I believe he's in North Carolina in his most recent videos, if you just get to the ballot before somebody else, like if I got there before Joe Biggs, I could vote as Joe Biggs if I knew basic information like his address. So it is that easy, to commit the voter fraud in some of these states.
I know some of that happened to. It didn't get reported. They told me about it. They told other friends about it. Went to the voting booth and found that they had already voted. And they'd crossed their name off the list and said, he looked at it and he saw that his dead mother had also voted because she was still on the list. They're not purging the rolls there, and the fact that they would say that it is racist to have a picture ID is absolute nonsense when they require a picture ID for everything.
Every race.
You can't cash a check. Every interaction with the government, they want your ID.
Well, even Nelson Mandela ran with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He said, get your voter ID.
When you look at how it's broken down, and Washington Post went in and basically broke this down with a very helpful guide as to where, if you're not legally allowed to vote in areas, you can vote without any ID, right? And so I broke it down in terms of percentage. There's only 14% of the states, only 14% of the states where you have to have a photo ID that's required. Some will request it, some will request other ID. Most of them don't even request anything. 39% no ID. And North Carolina is one of those places. That's why you saw what happened with James O'Keefe.
They said he was asked for his, and that was breaking the law, he said. When she asked him for a photo ID, he said he was kind of set back from the whole situation, like, okay, you're doing the right thing, but technically you're breaking the law.
Yeah, yeah. I want to get one more from Leanne, if you got one more that's interesting, and then we'll come back. I want to talk just a little bit more about the Second Amendment militarization of the police, and then we'll go to break with Jakari's report. Leanne, have you got another one for us from Twitter?
Well, one of the questions here, since we're talking about the Second Amendment, they want to know why the Second Amendment is so important here, specifically speaking about Florida.
Okay, why is it important, guys?
Well, it's your right to keep and bear arms, which is your last line of defense. It's a worst-case scenario that you may have to defend yourself against the government, but I don't think it's a complete impossibility.
But don't you want that choice to be able to go, okay, I can get one?
Yeah.
I mean, instead of feeling like you got to, duck and dodge and cheat a few corners to get something like that. I mean, I would rather have that choice to be like, all right, I don't feel comfortable with having a gun, so I'm not going to have one. Or I do feel comfortable to have a gun, so I'm going to go get one. That's something that everyone should have.
Yeah, and just like I said earlier, if you want a gun, that's fine. Like I went out to the campus, I wasn't forcing a gun in anybody's hand. And I was like, if you want one and you're of sound mind and body and of age, hey, go get one. That should be your right as an American, because a lot of people, they want you to go jump to the hoops and get a concealed carry and all that, and that's all well and good. But the fact of the matter is, you have a right to bear arms if you have not committed any crime. And even if you have committed a crime, I'll just touch on this briefly. When you talk about felons and felons not being able to carry guns, some of these felons have done no violent crimes. They have things like hot checks. That's not a violent crime, and it's something I don't think is something should bar you from having your right to bear arms.
I'll say no free man should ever be disbarred the use of guns. It was considered to be a mark of being a slave not to have weapons to protect yourself. The founders of this country understood that. Now, when I was running and involved with the Libertarian Party before, we used to have people come to us all the time and say, look, you say that it's a check against government power. What are you going to do against big military weapons when you've only got pistols? Well, in the Warsaw Ghetto, they had unarmed Jews who, with a hammer or whatever, got one pistol, then got more pistols, and eventually they held down an entire Panzer division for such a long time that in order to control the revolt, they essentially burned the city to the ground. Now, you can't do that on a nationwide basis if people own guns. Right. It is an effective restraint. And that's what it is. It's a restraint. It's not a threat to the government. It's a restraint. It's what they do with nuclear weapons during the Mutual Assured Destruction program, right? Having the nuclear weapon, they didn't want to use it. They ultimately did not. We hope that Obama is not bringing back the Cold War to get us into a situation where we're going to start using it again. But the bottom line is, sometimes the way that you have peace is with power. Sometimes the way that you restrain a government is by having arms, even though you don't use them. And if you don't have the ability to protect yourself against criminals, if you don't have the ability to protect yourself from a government, you are nothing but a slave. Nothing but a slave.
It also touches on a Red Dawn scenario. You know, who wants to invade us because they don't only have to fight our military, our police, but the normal citizen.
Yes.
You know, you're going to have normal citizens pulling out AKs and ARs and, you know, whatever they have their hands on. Nobody wants to come in here and invade Texas.
Well, I tweeted something out when the incident happened in Canada, and I said, you know, when you disarm your citizens, it makes you a soft target for terrorism. And it did get under the skin of a lot of Canadians, but I would say tenfold tweeted me back and agreed. They're like, yeah, you know, this pisses me off. A lot of these guys were ex-Canadian military. They're like, you know, I've had a gun my entire career, and then when I get it, I'm told I can have one, and I no longer have that feeling like I can protect myself. He's like, I hate that. It hurts.
Yes.
You know, that's got to be a horrible feeling to know that you don't have that choice.
Just from a self-defense situation, whether you're in a situation with a terrorist or whether you got somebody that's hopped up on drugs and starts shooting up a school or whatever, somebody with a gun can always take out one person, but they can't take out the entire crowd if somebody else is armed. They'll stop them. And so that's why you have it. It restrains it. It's not a panacea. There is no perfect solution. You can't stop people from coming in and sneaking up behind somebody and shooting them in the head. But you can stop them from shooting everybody in the head because they're the only person with a weapon. Let's go to Jakari's report on the shenanigans that Bloomberg and others are up to.
Hey, before we do that, David, I want to read a couple tweets real quick.
Okay.
There's a couple things that we're going to be covering.
More tweets.
Yeah, so we got the Florida Amendment, 2 questions about miracle marijuana. We're going to be covering that coming up. This is Rob doing the control room, by the way. Hey, everybody out there. And also, there's another one. How do we keep these Republicans we're about to elect true to their oaths? I think that's a very, very important question that we're going to try to answer today. And one question is, you got to hold their feet to the fire. You have to keep these people accountable. You can't just get mad when the Democrats are in power. You have to go to these meetings and tell the Republicans, look, we're sick and tired of this stuff. We're sick and tired of all this wasteful money and all these wars. And that's one way we're going to change this. Because the Democrats, they don't seem to want to listen, at least the vast majority of them. They're bought and sold, just like a lot of major Republicans, the boner Republicans out there. So we do have to watch out for those, and I know we're going to be covering that later, but I just saw those 2 tweets and wanted to cover those real quick. But yeah, you're about to throw to Jakari's. I'll throw back to you, David.
Yeah, you know, Rob, one of the problems that we see is that at this stage of the game, many people are looking at it and saying, wow, I've got 2 really bad choices. In many cases, they don't realize that there's somebody else on the ballot, maybe a couple more people on the ballot that they haven't really looked at. But I think a lot of people get involved way too late. By the time you get to the general election, at that point, it's usually too late. You've already missed the Tea Party candidate. You've already missed the guy who might have challenged that incumbent who basically lied to your face, goes to Washington and basically cashes in. And, you know, when you ignore the ability to get these people out at the primary level, then you wind up downstream with essentially nothing to go for. And the other part of this, too, is, you know, we talk about voter ID fraud. There's also, of course, the messing with the voting machines, how the votes are counted. But before all of that happens, there's a certain fraud that's being committed against you, and that is not letting people on the ballot, putting restrictions up for third-party independent candidates that the political parties don't have to go through, the Democrats and Republicans don't have to go through, limiting who is allowed to be in the debates so that you don't have a real substantive discussion there. So those types of things, if you would get angry about the fact that they are censoring what you can hear and censoring the candidates that are on the ballot, that would go a long way as well. Let's go to Jakari's report, and we're going to be back with, we're going to look at some political ads with Leanne McAdoo is going to be in here, and you're going to be amazed at some of the ads that have been aired this year. Here's Jakari's report.
With all the gun rhetoric going on around the nation, it's very important that you don't vote in a wolf in sheep's clothing. A good way to do this is go to the sites, the NRA, also Gun Owners of America. You can go to these sites and select by state the people who have your best interest at heart. And there you see the